Welcome back to another episode of Infidelity Tales Lab. We're truly thankful for your continued support. Quick question for our viewers. Which country or city are you watching from? We love knowing how far these stories reach. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. Foundations of Sand. Dominic Nick Harmon wiped sweat from his brow as he inspected the final details of the luxury beachfront development. At 45, he'd built Harmon Construction from nothing into one of Florida's most respected mid-sized building firms. The ocean breeze carried the scent of salt and promise, much like the day he'd met Vanessa 20 years ago on Clearwater Beach. "Mr. Harmon, the investors are extremely pleased with the progress," said Trey, his project manager. "The Palmetto Resort will be our crown jewel." Nick nodded, his eyes tracking a seagull's flight. 20 years building toward this, Trey. This project will either make us or break us. What Trey didn't know was that Nick had leveraged everything for this development. Their savings, a second mortgage on their home, even Zoe's college fund temporarily. The risk was calculated. The Palmetto would generate enough revenue to secure their future permanently, if successful. The pressure was immense, but familiar. Nick had grown up with a father who abandoned the family when things got tough, leaving his mother to raise 3 children alone in a crumbling apartment in South Tampa. He'd sworn never to become that man. "Will Mrs. Harmon be joining us for the investor dinner tonight?" Trey asked. Nick checked his phone. No messages from Vanessa. Again, no. She has other commitments. Those commitments had grown increasingly frequent over the past year. Where once Vanessa had been his fiercest supporter, lately she'd become distant, critical, disinterested in his work or their marriage. He'd hoped their upcoming 20th anniversary might rekindle what they'd lost. Their 16-year-old daughter Zoe had grown equally cold, mimicking her mother's disdain. That evening, Nick drove home to their Mediterranean-style house in an affluent neighborhood. The house was silent when he entered. On the kitchen counter sat a wine glass with lipstick stains, Vanessa's signature crimson, beside a half-empty bottle of Cabernet. Nick climbed the stairs, loosening his tie. Light spilled from Zoe's bedroom. "Hey, kiddo," he said, knocking gently. Zoe glanced up from her phone, her expression flat. "Hey, where's your mom?" "Book club. They're discussing some thriller." Zoe returned to her screen, dismissing him. Nick nodded, though he knew the book club met on Tuesdays, not Thursdays. In their bedroom, Nick opened his closet safe and removed a thick envelope containing the voucher for the Turquoise Bay Resort in the Cayman Islands, an exclusive getaway known for its privacy and luxury. The voucher had cost him $15,000, money that should have gone toward the business, but he'd wanted to give Vanessa something special, reminding her of the carefree days when they'd first fallen in love. He'd planned to present it to her tomorrow night at dinner, 2 weeks before their actual anniversary, giving her time to prepare for their trip. The voucher included everything: private beachfront villa, personal chef, spa treatments, scuba diving. A dream escape he could scarcely afford but felt they desperately needed. Nick tucked the envelope into his jacket pocket and headed to his home office. The wall displayed photos chronicling their life together. Vanessa and him on their wedding day, her eyes bright with promise. 3-year-old Zoe on Nick's shoulders at Disney World. The 3 of them hiking in Colorado when Zoe was 12, before the smiles became forced. He opened his laptop to review the Palmetto Resort contracts, but found himself instead clicking through real estate listings in the Caymans. Perhaps someday, if the Palmetto succeeded, they could buy a vacation home there, rebuild what they'd lost. His phone buzzed with a text from Bryant Reynolds, his oldest friend and attorney. "Contracts look good. Financing secure if we close next week. Everything still on for tomorrow's meeting?" Nick replied affirmatively, though a knot tightened in his stomach. The meeting was crucial, the last hurdle before construction entered its final phase. Everything hinged on securing the remaining funding. At 11, headlights swept across the driveway. Nick heard the garage door, then Vanessa's footsteps. He continued working, pretending absorption in his paperwork. She appeared in the doorway, the scent of her perfume mingling with something else, cologne, not his. "Still working?" she asked, leaning against the doorframe. At 43, Vanessa remained striking. Honey blonde hair, athletic figure maintained by religious devotion to her Pilates studio, eyes that had once looked at him with desire, now carefully neutral. "Big day tomorrow," he replied, studying her. "How was book club?" "Enlightening," she said, a slight smile playing on her lips. "Diane made margaritas. I took an Uber." Diane, the supposed best friend who'd called Nick last month asking for Vanessa, surprised to learn she wasn't having dinner with him as claimed. "Smart," he said. "I've got a late meeting tomorrow, but I was hoping we could have dinner after. I have something for you." Vanessa's expression flickered with what might have been guilt. "I have clients until 6, then drinks with the girls." "Cancel the drinks. It's important." She sighed, irritation evident. "Fine. Galliano's at 7. Nick nodded, and she disappeared toward their bedroom. He remained in his office, listening to the shower run. His phone lit up with another text. "Bryant. Got some interesting information about Phoenix Holdings. Call me in the morning." Phoenix Holdings was the investment company funding much of the Palmetto project. Interesting, from Bryant, typically meant problematic. Nick rubbed his temples, anticipating the headache forming. Everything seemed to be unraveling simultaneously. His marriage, his daughter's affection, possibly now his business. But he'd weathered storms before. 20 years ago, he'd started with a single truck and a toolbox, taking any job to make ends meet while Vanessa worked double shifts as a nurse to support them. They'd built everything together. Or so he'd thought. Nick's phone buzzed again, this time with an email notification. The subject line, Turquoise Bay reservation confirmation. But he hadn't confirmed anything yet. The voucher remained in his pocket. He opened the email, confusion giving way to something colder as he read. The confirmation wasn't for him and Vanessa. The reservation had been modified to 2 different names, Vanessa Harmon and Leonardo Valenti. Leonardo Valenti. The Italian investor Vanessa had introduced him to 6 months ago at a charity gala. The man who'd looked at his wife with undisguised hunger while shaking Nick's hand. Nick stared at the email, the puzzle pieces finally locking into place. The late nights. The sudden interest in book clubs and girls' nights. The new lingerie he never saw her wear. The coldness. The criticism. And now, she'd somehow accessed the voucher he hadn't yet given her and transferred it to her lover's name. Nick closed his laptop, a calm settling over him that was more frightening than rage. Tomorrow, he would get answers. Tomorrow, everything would change. Chapter 2. The Gift Betrayed. The Palmetto Resort meeting collapsed spectacularly at 3:17 p.m. when Phoenix Holdings representative announced they were pulling their investment. No explanation, no negotiation, just a clinical severing of financial arteries that left the project hemorrhaging. "This isn't random," Bryant said as they regrouped in Nick's office afterward. "Someone deliberately torpedoed this deal. The question is who?" Nick barely heard him, his mind fixed on the dinner with Vanessa in 4 hours. Bryant's voice faded as Nick recalled meeting Leonardo Valenti, the easy charm, the European sophistication, the casual mention of his investment firm. His investment firm, Phoenix Holdings. "Nick, are you listening?" Bryant's concerned voice broke through. "Phoenix is Valenti's company," Nick said flatly. Bryant frowned. "The Italian guy? Vanessa's friend? Not just her friend, I suspect." Nick showed Bryant the email from Turquoise Bay. Bryant's expression darkened. "Jesus, Nick? I'm sorry. I need to know everything about him. Every business connection, every skeleton. And I need it fast. Nick, whatever you're thinking. I'm thinking I've been played for a fool, and it's time I change the game." At Galliano's, an upscale Italian restaurant downtown, Nick arrived first, requesting a corner table that offered privacy. He ordered scotch, neat, and waited. Vanessa swept in 15 minutes late, drawing glances from other diners. She wore a fitted black dress he didn't recognize, her lips painted that signature crimson. "Sorry I'm late," she said, sliding into her seat. "Client emergency." Nick nodded, studying her. "I ordered your usual." The waiter appeared with her gin martini, extra dry, 2 olives. She smiled her thanks. "So," she said after taking a sip, "what's this important thing you wanted to discuss?" Nick reached into his jacket and pulled out the Turquoise Bay envelope. "Happy anniversary." A bit early. Confusion flickered across her face. Genuine confusion. before she composed herself and took the envelope. She opened it slowly, examining the contents, her expression carefully neutral. "The Cayman Islands?" she said finally. "This looks expensive." 15,000, Nick confirmed. "For our 20th. 2 weeks of paradise." Vanessa set the voucher down, guilt and calculation warring behind her eyes. "Nick, this is lovely, but you know how busy the studio is right now. I can't just disappear for 2 weeks. Can't or won't." Nick took a sip of scotch. The interesting thing about gift vouchers is they generate notifications when they're modified, like when the names on the reservation change. The color drained from Vanessa's face. "I can explain." "Please do. Explain how you found a gift I hadn't given you yet. Explain who Leonardo Valenti is. Explain why his investment firm pulled out of my project today, potentially bankrupting me." Vanessa's hand trembled as she reached for her martini. "It's not what you think." "No, because I think my wife is sleeping with a man who's systematically destroying everything I've built." "Leo isn't destroying anything," she hissed. "He's offering me a life beyond your constant obsession with work, beyond struggling to make ends meet while you pour everything into your precious business." "Struggling?" Nick laughed bitterly. "We live in a $500,000 home. Zoe attends private school. Your studio, my studio that I've built myself, while you were busy chasing your construction dreams. Dreams that paid for everything we have." Nick's voice remained low, controlled, though several nearby diners glanced their way. Vanessa leaned forward. "Leo sees me, appreciates me, doesn't expect me to sit at home while he works 18-hour days. And what does Leo expect from my daughter, since she apparently now benefits from his generosity too?" Vanessa's expression faltered. "What are you talking about?" "The voucher. You and Leo planned to use my anniversary gift for yourselves. And Zoe knew about it." The waiter approached, but Nick waved him away. "Zoe doesn't know anything," Vanessa insisted. "We'll see," Nick said, pulling out his phone and dialing. He put on speaker. Zoe answered on the third ring. "Dad? What's up?" "Hey, kiddo. Quick question. Did your mom mention anything about a trip coming up?" Silence stretched for several seconds. What kind of trip?" "To the Cayman Islands. With her friend Leo." More silence. Then, quietly, "I wasn't supposed to tell you." Nick's eyes never left Vanessa's face. "And what did your mom promise you in exchange for keeping her secret?" "Dad, the truth, Zoe." A sigh. "A new MacBook. And cash for clothes. Mom said you waste money on your business anyway." "I see. Thanks for being honest, finally." He ended the call. Vanessa's face hardened. "You had no right to involve her. She involved herself when she chose to lie for you. For money." Nick tucked his phone away. "So, to summarize, you found my anniversary gift, transferred it to your lover's name, bribed our daughter to cover for you, and your lover is deliberately destroying my business." "Leo's business decisions have nothing to do with us," Vanessa said defensively. "Bullshit. This is coordinated. The question is why? What's the end game, Vanessa? Divorce me when I'm bankrupted so you get nothing in the settlement?" Vanessa's silence was damning. "Amazing," Nick said softly. 20 years together, and you couldn't even be bothered to divorce me honestly. You're impossible to talk to when you're like this." "Like what?" "Angry about betrayal. Self-righteous." She leaned forward. "You think I don't know about your past? The things you did before we met?" Leo has friends who remember Nick Harmon from South Tampa. Nick went very still. "What exactly do you think you know?" Vanessa smiled coldly. "Enough. Leo says men like you never really change. You just find new masks." Nick drained his scotch. "Tell Leo to enjoy the resort. I hear the snorkeling is fantastic this time of year." "That's it? You're giving up? On what? A wife who's fucking another man? A daughter who can be bought with Apple products? A business being deliberately sabotaged?" Nick placed cash on the table. "I think it's time we all stop pretending." He stood to leave, but Vanessa caught his wrist. "Nick, wait. There are things you don't understand." "I understand perfectly. Enjoy your trip." Nick left Galliano's and drove directly to the office instead of home. He wouldn't return there tonight, or possibly ever again. In his office, he opened his laptop and began emptying accounts, transferring funds, making calls. If war had been declared, he would not be caught unprepared. His phone vibrated repeatedly with texts and calls for Vanessa, which he ignored. Around midnight, Brian arrived with Chinese food and grim determination. "I've got background on Valeni," he said, dropping a folder on Nick's desk. "It's worse than we thought. And there's something else, something about South Tampa 25 years ago. Your name came up in connection with." "I know what it's in connection with," Nick interrupted. "The question is, how does Valeni know? Nobody alive remembers that night, except me." Bryant studied his oldest friend. "What do you want to do?" Nick's face hardened into lines few had ever seen. "I want to remind them who I really am." Chapter 3. The Departure. 3:27 a.m. Nick stood in the doorway of Zoe's bedroom, watching his daughter sleep. Despite everything, his chest ached with love for this child, now nearly a woman, who'd once looked at him like he hung the moon. Somewhere in the past few years, that admiration had curdled into contempt, nurtured by Vanessa's subtle campaign to turn Zoe against him. Downstairs, Vanessa had finally fallen asleep on the couch after calling and texting relentlessly. He hadn't responded, hadn't returned home until he knew she would be unconscious, giving him time to gather what he needed. Nick moved silently through the house, collecting essential documents, birth certificates, passports, insurance policies, property deeds. In his home office, he unlocked the floor's safe hidden under the Persian rug, removing cash, gold coins, an unregistered phone, and a small leather case he hadn't opened in 19 years. He hesitated, then took that too. In the kitchen, he pinned a short note. "I know everything. I'm leaving. Don't try to find me." He placed it on the counter beside the empty turquoise bait envelope. As Nick carried his bags to the car, his phone lit up with a text from a number he hadn't seen in decades. "Got your message. Everything's arranged. Like old times." He sent back a single word. "Thanks." Dawn painted the horizon as Nick merged onto I-75 heading north. Radio silence filled the car until his personal phone rang. "Bryant." "Tell me you haven't done anything stupid," Bryant said when he answered. "Define stupid." "Nick, for God's sake. Where are you?" "Better you don't know." Nick checked his rearview mirror, an old habit resurging. "Did you secure the remaining project assets?" "Yes, but that's not important right now. Valeni's not just some random investor. He's connected. Old Miami money with offshore accounts that trace back to questionable operations in Italy. Whatever game you're playing." "It's not a game," Nick interrupted. "And I'm not playing. How long until they realize what I've done?" Bryant sighed heavily. "The bank opens at 9, so probably by 9:15. The temporary injunction will only hold for 48 hours, 72 at most. After that, they'll come after whatever's left. That's all I need. Did you handle the other matter?" "The storage unit is rented under the name we discussed. Keys in the usual place." "Nick, I'm begging you. Take care of yourself, Bryant. Stay clear of what's coming." Nick ended the call and tossed the phone out the window into a passing lake. Next, he disabled the GPS in his vehicle and swapped the license plate at a rest stop with one he'd brought from a salvage yard. 6 hours later, he pulled into a nondescript storage facility outside Atlanta. Using a key from beneath a false rock, he unlocked unit number 417. Inside waited a black sedan with tinted windows, clean papers, and a packed duffel. Nick transferred his belongings, abandoned his SUV, and continued north in the sedan. Meanwhile, back in Tampa, Vanessa awakened to an empty house and Nick's terse note. Her initial reaction was annoyance rather than concern. She called Leonardo. "He knows," she said without preamble. "And he's gone." Leo's accented voice remained calm. "Gone where?" "How should I know? He left a note saying not to look for him." "This changes nothing. The plan proceeds. Without his signature on the refinancing documents, the bank will foreclose on both the project and your home within 30 days. My offer to purchase the distressed assets will then be accepted. You'll file for divorce citing abandonment. And Zoe will understand when she sees the life we can provide." Leo's voice softened. "Did you secure the items from his office?" "Not yet. I'll do it today. The sooner the better, cara mia. Especially the contents of his floor safe." After hanging up, Vanessa headed to Nick's office. The floor safe stood open and empty. "Shit," she muttered, pulling out her phone. Leo answered immediately. Problem. The safe is cleaned out. Everything's gone. Silence stretched for several seconds. When exactly did he leave? I don't know. I fell asleep on the couch around 2. His note was here when I woke up. Check the garage. Is his filing cabinet still there? Vanessa hurried to the garage. The cabinet stood open, its contents scattered. Someone went through it in a hurry. Listen carefully. Leo's voice had lost its usual smoothness. Nick may have taken documents that could complicate our arrangement. Call his office. Tell them he's ill and you're handling urgent matters for him. We need to know exactly what he took. Vanessa hung up and called Nick's secretary, using the story Leo suggested. The response chilled her. Mrs. Harmon. Mr. Harmon cleaned out his office last night, the secretary said nervously. He told us all to take 2 weeks paid vacation starting immediately. The office is closed. Vanessa's heartbeat quickened. Did he say where he was going? No, ma'am. But he seemed different. Not himself. After hanging up, Vanessa tried Bryant Reynolds repeatedly, getting voicemail each time. Zoe emerged from her bedroom around noon, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Where's Dad? Vanessa hesitated. He's gone for a while. Business trip. Zoe's eyes narrowed. Then why is his closet half empty? I checked when I heard you freaking out on the phone. It's complicated, Zoe. Does this have to do with Leo? And a resort thing? Vanessa tensed. What exactly did your father say to you last night? Just asked if I knew about your trip with Leo. Zoe folded her arms. He didn't sound right, Mom. He sounded scary. A chill ran down Vanessa's spine at her daughter's description. She'd only seen Nick truly angry once, early in their relationship, when a drunk had harassed her at a bar. Nick had transformed into someone unrecognizable, handling the situation with cold efficiency that left the harasser concussed and apologizing through broken teeth. Afterward, he'd explained his rough upbringing in South Tampa, promising she'd never see that side of him again. He kept that promise. Until now. Mom. Zoe's voice pulled her back. What's really going on? Before Vanessa could answer, her phone rang. Leo again. My contact at the bank called, he said without greeting. Nick withdrew everything yesterday afternoon. Checking, savings, business accounts, safety deposit box. All empty. How much? Nearly $3 million. Vanessa nearly dropped the phone. That's impossible. We don't have that kind of money. Apparently you do. Did, and there's more. The Palmetto Resort property has been transferred to a holding company registered in Wyoming. The house has a new mortgage against it. Maximum value. Funds disbursed yesterday. Vanessa sank into a chair, Zoe watching with increasing alarm. He planned this. He knew before dinner. This isn't some emotional reaction, Vanessa. This is calculated. My sources say he contacted Theodore Sullivan yesterday. The name meant nothing to her. Ooh, a ghost from Nick's past. Someone he knew before you met. Leo's voice lowered. Someone dangerous. For the first time, real fear replaced Vanessa's annoyance. Leo, what exactly did your friends tell you about Nick's past? That before he became Nicholas Harmon, respectable contractor, he ran with Theodore Sullivan's crew in South Tampa. They specialized in problem solving for people who couldn't go to the police. You're saying he was some kind of criminal? Vanessa laughed shakily. That's ridiculous. I've known Nick for 20 years. You've known who he wanted you to know, Leo countered. People like him don't change, Karamia. They just find better cover stories. After hanging up, Vanessa noticed Zoe's pale face. How much did you hear? Enough, Zoe said. Is it true? About Dad? Of course not, Vanessa said automatically, but uncertainty gnawed at her. Nick had always been vague about his life before they met, attributing his reticence to a painful childhood. She'd accepted that, never pushing. Now she wondered what else she'd accepted without question. That afternoon, they drove to Nick's office, finding it locked and dark. Next, they visited Bryant Reynolds' office, only to learn he'd taken emergency leave. No one knew when he'd return. By evening, Vanessa's fear had crystallized into something sharper. She unlocked Nick's desk drawer with a spare key he didn't know she had, searching for anything that might indicate where he'd gone. Instead, she found an unmarked USB drive. Back home, she plugged it into her laptop. It contained a single video file dated that morning. With trembling fingers, she pressed play. Nick's face filled the screen, his eyes harder than she'd ever seen them. "By now, you've discovered I'm gone," he began. "You've also discovered the accounts are empty, the house is mortgaged to the hilt, and the Palmetto project is beyond your reach. Good. You and Leonardo wanted to leave me with nothing. I've simply returned the favor." He leaned closer to the camera. "But this isn't about money. This is about betrayal. You didn't just cheat, Vanessa. You tried to destroy me. Worse, you turned our daughter against me." His expression shifted, a coldness entering his eyes that made Vanessa physically recoil. "Tell Leo he made a mistake digging into South Tampa. Tell him Theodore Sullivan sends his regards." Nick's smile was terrifying in its calmness. "I'll be seeing both of you soon. And Vanessa, that vacation would have been your last chance. Remember that when what's coming finally arrives." The screen went black. Vanessa stared at the darkened laptop, a memory surfacing from years ago. Nick explaining the scar on his left shoulder. Construction accident, he'd said. She believed him because he was Nick, solid and dependable Nick. Now she wondered if it had been something else entirely. Her phone rang, Leo again. "Sullivan's been spotted in Miami," he said without preamble. "And 3 of my associates have gone dark. This is escalating too quickly. Pack essentials for you and Zoe. We're leaving tonight." "Leaving? To go where?" "Somewhere safe." Nick's made his move. Now we make ours. After hanging up, Vanessa turned to find Zoe standing in the doorway, face pale, clutching her phone. "Dad texted me," she whispered. Vanessa's blood ran cold. "What did he say?" Zoe held out her phone, displaying a single line. "When the time comes, remember who was honest with you." 5 days later, Vanessa and Zoe huddled in Leo's Miami penthouse, effectively prisoners as the situation deteriorated. 3 of Leo's business associates had been found with broken kneecaps in a shipping container. Bryant Reynolds had vanished completely. The FBI had opened investigations into Phoenix Holdings, and someone had systematically dismantled Leo's extensive security system, leaving behind a single playing card, the King of Spades, with "Sullivan sends regards" written across it. Leo's calm sophistication had crumbled, replaced by paranoid fear. He doubled his security detail, installed new systems, moved between properties. Nothing helped. Each day brought a new disaster. Accounts frozen, properties seized, associates arrested or vanishing. It was as if an invisible hand were systematically erasing Leonardo Valenti's existence. On the 6th night, Vanessa awoke to find Leonardo standing by the bedroom window, gun in hand, watching the street below. "We need to go back," she said quietly. Leo didn't turn. "Go back where?" "To Tampa. To the house. This has gone far enough." "It's too late for that," Leo whispered, his accent thickening with stress. "He won't stop now. He's still my husband, the father of my child. If I talk to him..." Leo spun, his expression frantic. "The man hunting us isn't your husband. He's who Nick was before he met you. And that man won't stop until we're destroyed." A soft click echoed through the apartment, the sound of the front door unlocking. Leo raised his gun toward the bedroom door. "Call security," he hissed. Vanessa reached for her phone, but before she could dial, power to the penthouse cut out, plunging them into darkness. In the sudden silence, they heard footsteps approaching the bedroom. Too late. A familiar voice called softly from the darkness. Far, far too late. Chapter 4. The Shadow Resurfaces. Theodore Sullivan hadn't changed much in 2 decades. At 65, his silver hair remained thick, his posture military straight, his blue eyes clear and penetrating. The dock behind his Louisiana Bayou house stretched into murky water where alligators patrolled silently. Nick sat across from his former mentor, drinking bourbon as sunset painted the sky crimson. "Never thought I'd see you again," Sullivan said, voice gravelly from years of cigarettes. "Figured you'd die Nicholas Harmon, respectable businessman, never looking back." Nick stared at his drink. "That was the plan. Until my wife and her lover decided to take everything." Sullivan chuckled. "Women, always your weakness, Dominic." The name, his real name, felt strange after so long. Dominic Reeves had supposedly died 20 years ago in a boating accident. His body never recovered. Nicholas Harmon had appeared in Tampa shortly after, with clean papers and a construction business. Not women, Nick corrected. Vanessa was different. Clearly not different enough. Sullivan refilled their glasses. So what's your play? You didn't come all this way for relationship advice. I need resources. Contacts. The kind I left behind. Sullivan studied him. You're rusty, son. And what you're asking, it doesn't wash off afterward. You can't go back to being Nicholas Harmon when it's done. Nicholas Harmon died the moment Vanessa betrayed him. Sullivan nodded slowly. The Italian. Valenti. He's connected. I know. Not just legitimate business. Old family ties back in Naples. The kind that disappear people. I'm counting on it, Nick said. I want him to call in those connections. I want him scared enough to show his true nature to Vanessa. Sullivan's eyes narrowed. You still care about her? I care about my daughter, Nick corrected. Zoe's watching her mother choose this man over me. I want her to see exactly who her mother chose. And after the girl sees? What then? Nick's expression hardened. Then Dominic Reeves finishes what Nicholas Harmon started. For 3 days, Nick and Sullivan planned meticulously. 2 of Sullivan's former crew joined them. Mason Porter, an electronics expert, and Darnell Washington, whose specialties included breaking and entering without a trace. On the 4th day, they moved to an unmarked warehouse outside Miami that Sullivan owned through shell companies. There, they established a command center with surveillance feeds covering Valenti's properties. He owns 6 residences in Florida alone, Mason said, tapping a computer screen, plus the penthouse where they're currently holed up. Nick studied the building schematics. Security? Top-notch, Darnell replied. But systems have weaknesses. People especially. Start with his business associates, Nick instructed. I want them neutralized first. Cut off his support network. Sullivan watched from the corner, expression unreadable. You remember how this works? Nick opened the leather case he'd retrieved from his home safe, removing specialized tools he hadn't touched in 20 years. His fingers moved with muscle memory, assembling a complex electronic device. Some things you don't forget, he said quietly. Over the next 48 hours, they executed the first phase flawlessly. 3 of Valenti's key business associates were located, subdued, and left damaged, physically and reputationally, in a shipping container with evidence of their criminal activities sent anonymously to the FBI. Phase 2 involved dismantling Valenti's business empire. Using knowledge gained from the Palmetto Resort dealings and Bryant's research, they identified vulnerabilities in Phoenix holding structure. Nick leveraged contacts at the SEC and FBI, anonymously providing evidence of money laundering, tax evasion, and connections to organized crime. The beauty, Sullivan remarked as they watched news reports of Phoenix Holdings assets being frozen, is that everything we're feeding them is true. Valenti actually did these things. Nick nodded grimly. That's why I chose him as the target. Clean businessmen don't panic this way. By day 5, they'd breached Valenti's security systems, leaving the King of Spades calling card as psychological warfare. He's unraveling, Mason reported, monitoring surveillance. Moved them twice yesterday. Back at the penthouse now. He's armed. Nick checked his watch. Time for phase 3. Sullivan frowned. You sure about this part? It's high risk. It's necessary. Zoe needs to see. That night, they cut power to Valenti's penthouse. Nick entered alone, using skills long dormant but not forgotten. He moved through the darkness like a ghost, hearing Vanessa and Valenti's panicked whispers from the master bedroom. Standing outside the door, he called softly, too late. Far, far too late. Inside, he heard Valenti cock his gun. Leo, don't, Vanessa whispered urgently. Nick pushed the door open slowly. The beam from his flashlight illuminated Leo first, disheveled, wild-eyed, gun pointed unsteadily. Then Vanessa, her face a mask of fear and defiance. Hello, wife, Nick said calmly. Nick, she managed. This has gone far enough. Whatever you think. Where's Zoe? He interrupted. Guest room, Vanessa answered. Asleep. Lying again, Nick said. She's hiding in the closet, terrified because your boyfriend is waving a gun around like a madman. Leo's hand trembled. You've destroyed everything. Not quite everything, Nick corrected. Not yet. What do you want? Vanessa demanded. Originally, to teach you both a lesson. Now, Nick shrugged. I'm just enjoying watching the famous Leonardo Valenti fall apart. Tell me, Leo, have your Neapolitan friends arrived yet? The ones who handle problems. Leo's face drained of color. How do you know about your family connections to the Camorra? Your money laundering operation? The body's buried behind that villa in Positano. Nick smiled coldly. I know everything, Leo. Just like I warned Vanessa I would. Vanessa looked between them, confusion evident. Leo, what is he talking about? Before Leo could answer, Nick continued. He didn't tell you? Your sophisticated European businessman is actually Alessandro Valenti, nephew of Camorra underboss Matteo Valenti. He changed his name when the Italian authorities got too close. The accent? Mostly fake. He grew up in Newark. Shut up, Leo shouted, his accent indeed slipping. Nick's smile widened. Did he mention that part of his plan was to use your Pilates studio to launder money? That the reason he pursued you specifically was because my construction company had potential projects that could move millions in dirty cash? Vanessa stared at Leo. Is that true? Leo's expression confirmed it before his words could. It started that way, he admitted. But I fell in love with you. The plan changed. Did it? Nick asked. Or did you just adjust when you realized I wasn't as controllable as you hoped? When Vanessa couldn't convince me to take on your investors? A sound from the hallway drew their attention. Zoe stood in the doorway, eyes wide with fear and confusion. Zoe, Nick said softly, you shouldn't be here. Dad, her voice trembled. What's happening? Leo swung his gun toward Nick. Enough talking. You think you've won? My people are already on their way. They'll find you, and they'll make you beg for death. Nick seemed unconcerned. Your people have been arrested, disappeared, or decided you're not worth the risk, Leo. You're alone. As if on cue, Nick's phone buzzed. He checked it, then held the screen toward Leo. See? That's your cousin Marco being taken into custody at Miami International. Your Uncle Matteo sent him to clean up your mess. Too bad the FBI was waiting. Leo's composure cracked completely. With a strangled cry, he fired wildly at Nick, who dropped to the floor as Vanessa and Zoe screamed. The bullet shattered a mirror. Nick rolled, coming up with his own weapon, but didn't fire. Dad! Zoe cried out. Leo spun toward the sound, gun still raised, and now pointing in Zoe's direction. Nick's voice cut through the chaos like ice. Gun down, Leo. Now. But Leo was beyond reason, his face contorted with rage and fear. You did this. You ruined everything. Leo, please, Vanessa begged, moving toward Zoe. Put the gun down. For a terrible moment, Leo seemed not to recognize her, his eyes unfocused. Then something shifted in his expression, calculation replacing panic. He grabbed Vanessa as she passed him, pressing the gun to her temple. Here's what's going to happen, he said, accent completely gone now, replaced by flat American tones. I'm walking out with her. You try to stop me, she dies. Nick's expression remained eerily calm. Let her go, Leo. This is between us. Too late for that, Leo snarled, backing toward the door, dragging Vanessa with him. Zoe, come here. Now. The girl hesitated, looking between her father and mother. Stay where you are, Zoe, Nick said quietly. You don't give the orders anymore. Leo shouted. I do. Zoe, come here or your mother gets hurt. Terrified, Zoe took a step toward them. Zoe, stop, Nick commanded. To Leo, he said, you're not taking my daughter. Watch me. Leo gestured with the gun. Zoe now. Nick's hand moved to his pocket, retrieving what looked like a key fob. Last chance, Leo. Leo laughed bitterly. Or what? You'll beep your car. Nick pressed the button. Immediately, Leo screamed and released Vanessa, dropping to his knees. The gun clattered to the floor as he clutched his ear, blood seeping between his fingers. Micro-explosive, Nick explained calmly, lowering his weapon. Planted in your earpiece yesterday, during your morning run. Small enough to maim, not kill. Unless you move wrong. Vanessa scrambled away from Leo, pulling Zoe with her. You're insane, she whispered, staring at Nick. No, Nick replied, eyes never leaving Leo's crumpled form. Just prepared. Sullivan and Mason appeared in the doorway, weapons drawn. All clear, Sullivan asked. Nick nodded. Take him downstairs. Our federal friends should be arriving shortly. As they hauled the moaning Leo away, Nick finally looked at Vanessa and Zoe, his expression softening marginally. Are you hurt? Both shook their heads, too shocked to speak. Good. Pack essentials. You're not staying here. Where are we going? Vanessa asked. You're going to a hotel under guard until this is finished. I have unfinished business. And then what? Nick's eyes hardened again. And then we'll discuss terms. Terms, Vanessa repeated. For divorce. For Zoe's custody. For what remains of our lives. Nick turned to leave, then paused. 1 week. That's how long my business with Valeni and his associates will take. Then we'll talk. As he walked away, Zoe called after him, Dad, wait. Nick stopped, but didn't turn. Who are you? She asked, voice small. Really? For a moment, he seemed to struggle with himself. Then he said, quietly, someone who tried very hard to be better than his past. Someone who failed when it mattered most. With that, he disappeared into the darkness, leaving Vanessa and Zoe to wonder if they'd ever truly known him at all. Chapter 5. Shattered Reflections. The Palm Harbor Grand Hotel, suite overlooked Tampa Bay, its luxury a gilded cage for Vanessa and Zoe. Armed security, whether Nick's men or federal agents, Vanessa couldn't tell, maintained discreet positions in the hallway. They were polite but firm. Mother and daughter were not to leave without authorization. 3 days had passed since the Miami penthouse confrontation. 3 days of news reports documenting Leonardo Valeni's spectacular downfall, arrests across 3 continents, assets frozen, connections to organized crime exposed. Leo himself had disappeared into federal custody, reportedly cooperating against higher-level targets in exchange for consideration. Vanessa sat on the balcony, watching sunset paint the water gold. Inside, Zoe remained curled on the sofa, earbuds in, shutting out the world as she had since their arrival. A knock at the door startled them both. One of the security men entered, followed by Bryant Reynolds. Zoe pulled out her earbuds, sitting up straighter. Mrs. Harmon, Zoe, Bryant greeted them with strained politeness. Where's Nick? Vanessa asked immediately. Unavailable. Bryant placed a leather portfolio on the coffee table. He asked me to bring these documents for your review. More divorce papers? Vanessa asked bitterly. Actually, no. Bryant opened the portfolio, revealing financial statements. These show the current status of your family's assets. Vanessa scanned the documents, confusion growing. This says Harmon Construction is intact and profitable. It is. The Palmetto Resort project continues on schedule, now with legitimate investors. But Leo said Nick withdrew everything, millions, before he disappeared. Bryant's expression remained neutral. Nick moved assets to secure them, yes, but he didn't spend or hide them. Every penny is accounted for. What about our house? The mortgage? Paid off entirely last week. Bryant handed her another document. The property is now solely in your name. Vanessa stared at him, uncomprehending. Why would he do that? Because despite everything, he still cares what happens to you. Bryant's professional demeanor cracked slightly, though God knows why. Zoe joined them, examining the papers. So we're not broke? Everything's okay. Financially, yes, Bryant confirmed. Your college fund remains intact, Zoe. In fact, it's been increased. Vanessa set the papers down. When can we go home? Tomorrow, if you wish. The security situation has been resolved. Something in his tone made Vanessa look up sharply. What does that mean? Bryant hesitated. The individuals who posed a threat have been neutralized. Some by law enforcement, others by different means. By Nick, you mean? Vanessa said flatly. Bryant didn't confirm or deny. Instead, he produced a USB drive. Nick asked me to give you this. He said it explains things he never could in person. After Bryant left, Vanessa stared at the drive, uncertain whether to view its contents. Play it, Zoe said quietly. We need to know. Vanessa nodded, plugging the drive into the suite's laptop. A video file opened, Nick sitting in what appeared to be a hotel room, looking exhausted but composed. Vanessa, Zoe, he began. By now, Brian has explained your financial situation. Everything that was ours remains yours. The house, the business, the accounts, it's all secure. He rubbed his face, suddenly looking older. What Bryant can't explain is who I was before we met. Who I became again when I felt threatened. Nick took a deep breath. I was born Dominic Reeves in South Tampa. My father left when I was 8. By 16, I was running with Theodore Sullivan's crew. Not exactly criminals, not exactly legal. We specialized in solving problems for people who couldn't go to the police. His eyes met the camera directly. I was good at it. Too good. By 23, I had money, respect, and a reputation that kept me looking over my shoulder. Then a job went wrong. People died who shouldn't have. I decided to disappear. Nick leaned forward. Theodore helped me fake my death. Dominic Reeves drowned in Tampa Bay. Nicholas Harmon appeared with clean papers and a small construction business. I swore I'd never go back to that life. He smiled sadly. Then I met you, Vanessa. You were everything Dominic's world lacked. Honest, caring, untainted by darkness. I fell in love with who I could be around you. When Zoe was born, I thought I'd finally escaped my past completely. His expression hardened. When I discovered your betrayal with Leo, something broke inside me. The walls I'd built between Dominic and Nick crumbled. I called Theodore. The rest, you've witnessed. Nick looked away briefly, composing himself. I won't apologize for protecting what's mine, for destroying Leo and his associates. They were criminals who would have eventually destroyed you too, Vanessa. But I am sorry you and Zoe had to see the man I used to be. He sighed heavily. I've arranged everything so you'll both be taken care of, regardless of what happens next. The house, the business accounts, they're yours. I've included documents transferring everything legally. As for us, Nick paused, swallowing hard. That's for you to decide. I'll be at the lighthouse on Clearwater Beach tomorrow at sunset, where we first met. If you come, we'll talk about the future. If not, I'll understand, and you'll never have to see me again. The screen went black. Vanessa sat motionless, memories flooding back. Inconsistencies in Nick's past she'd ignored, skills that seemed unusual for a contractor, the cold efficiency that emerged in crisis. The pieces assembled into a picture of a man she'd never fully known. Did you know? Zoe asked quietly. About his past? No, Vanessa admitted. Or maybe I suspected, but didn't want to see. Are you going tomorrow? To the lighthouse. Vanessa stared out at the darkening bay. I don't know. That night, sleep eluded her. Images of Nick, the steady husband she'd known for 20 years, and the stranger who'd dismantled Leo's organization with terrifying precision, blurred together. She found herself questioning every memory, wondering which version was real. Had she truly known him? Had he truly loved her? Or had it all been an elaborate performance by a man hiding from his past? More disturbing were her questions about herself. Why had she turned to Leo? Had it been excitement? Boredom? Or something deeper? A subconscious recognition of the darkness in Nick that resonated with something in herself? She'd told herself Nick was consumed by work, neglectful, taking her for granted. The narrative had justified her actions with Leo, her manipulation of Zoe. But now, reviewing the past year objectively, she recognized her own role in their deteriorating marriage. Nick had worked tirelessly to provide the life she wanted. The Palmetto Resort project, the very one Leo had tried to sabotage, had been Nick's attempt to secure their financial future permanently. While she'd presented it to Zoe as selfish ambition, it had actually been an expression of his commitment to their family. Morning light found her still awake, no closer to a decision about the lighthouse meeting. Zoe appeared in the doorway of Vanessa's bedroom, dressed and determined. I'm going, she announced. Whether you come or not. Vanessa sat up. Zoe, it's complicated. It's really not. Zoe interrupted. Dad lied about his past. You cheated with a criminal who tried to destroy us. You both messed up. The difference is Dad is trying to fix things. You don't understand. Understand perfectly, Zoe said, eyes flashing. You used me against him. Made me believe he didn't care about us. Bribed me to keep your secrets. Vanessa flinched at the raw truth. I never meant to hurt you, but you did. And now Dad's offering a chance to talk, to maybe fix this, and you're hiding in here feeling sorry for yourself. The words stung because they were accurate. Vanessa had been wallowing, focusing on Nick's deception while ignoring her own betrayals. He wasn't the husband I thought I knew, she said quietly. No, Zoe agreed. He was better. The man who'd start over completely to escape a violent past. The man who built a legitimate business from nothing. The man who'd risk everything to protect his family, even from themselves. Vanessa looked at her daughter, nearly grown, suddenly wise beyond her years. When did you get so insightful? When I watched someone point a gun at my mother and saw my father save her without hesitation, even after everything you'd done. Zoe's voice wavered. He could have let Leo hurt you. Part of him probably wanted to, but he didn't. The truth of this settled over Vanessa like a physical weight. Despite her betrayal, despite the pain she'd caused, Nick had protected her, then ensured her financial security before disappearing again. The car leaves at 5, Zoe said, turning to go. I'll be in it. I hope you will too. Left alone, Vanessa moved to the balcony, gazing at the bay. The same waters where Dominic Reeves had supposedly drowned, allowing Nicholas Harmon to emerge. A death and rebirth. Perhaps they all needed something similar now. Not physical death, but the death of old patterns, old resentments, old versions of themselves that no longer served. At 4:55 p.m., Vanessa joined Zoe in the hotel lobby. Her daughter's relief was palpable. You're coming, Zoe said, not quite a question. To listen, Vanessa clarified. Nothing more. What happens after depends on what he has to say. The security detail drove them to Clearwater Beach in silence. The lighthouse stood silhouetted against the setting sun, waves lapping gently at the shore. A solitary figure waited at the base, Nick, facing the water. As they approached, he turned. His expression remained carefully neutral, though something flickered in his eyes when he saw both of them. You came, he said simply. To hear you out, Vanessa replied. Not to make promises. Nick nodded. Fair enough. An awkward silence stretched between them. Finally, Zoe stepped forward and hugged her father fiercely. After a moment's surprise, Nick returned the embrace, closing his eyes briefly. I'm sorry, Dad, Zoe whispered. Nothing to be sorry for, kiddo, he replied softly. None of this was your fault, but I believe the worst about you. Let Mom turn me against you. Nick gently pulled back, meeting her eyes. You're 16, Zoe. Not responsible for navigating your parents' mess. Vanessa watched this exchange, emotion tightening her throat. Her anger, her sense of betrayal about Nick's hidden past, seemed suddenly petty compared to his forgiveness of their daughter. So, she said when Zoe stepped back, Theodore Sullivan, your mentor turned accomplice. Nick's expression tightened. Yes, the things you did to Leo and his associates were necessary, Nick finished firmly. They weren't just business rivals, Vanessa. They were dangerous criminals who would have eventually turned on you too, once they'd gotten what they wanted. And what about you? She challenged. Aren't you also dangerous? Yes, he answered without hesitation. The difference is my danger has always been directed at protecting what I love, not destroying it. The simple honesty of this statement caught her off guard. You never told me, she said quietly. 20 years, and I never knew who you really were. Because I wasn't that person anymore, Nick replied. Dominic Reeves died the day I met you. I became someone better, someone worthy of you and the family we built. Until I betrayed you, Vanessa finished. Nick's eyes held hers steadily. Until I felt everything I'd built slipping away, yes. Theodore once told me that under enough pressure, we all revert to who we truly are. Maybe he was right. Is that who you truly are, then? The man who systematically destroyed Leo's entire life? No. Nick looked out at the darkening water. That's who I was. Who I could be again if forced. But it's not who I want to be. What do you want, Nick? Vanessa asked, the question encompassing everything between them. He turned back to her, his expression more vulnerable than she'd seen in years. A second chance. Not as Nicholas Harmon, upstanding citizen. Not as Dominic Reeves, Theodore's protege. But as myself, all of it, the good and the bad, finally integrated. No more secrets, no more compartments. And us? What about our marriage? That's not just my decision, Nick replied. I won't pretend what you didn't hurt me to my core. But I won't pretend my response was measured or healthy either. He took a step closer. I'm willing to try again, if you are. With counseling. With complete honesty from both of us. It won't be easy. And if I can't, Vanessa asked, if this is too broken to fix, then we'll co-parent Zoe as best we can, and I'll respect whatever boundaries you set. His voice remained steady, though she could see the cost of these words in his eyes. The financial arrangements stand either way. You and Zoe will never want for anything. Zoe, who had been listening silently, spoke up. So, this isn't an ultimatum? We don't have to decide right now. No ultimatum, Nick confirmed. Just an opening. A possibility. The three stood in silence as the last light faded from the sky, the lighthouse beam beginning its circular sweep over the water. The same beam that had illuminated a younger Vanessa and Nick on their first meeting 2 decades earlier. I don't know if I could trust you again, Vanessa admitted finally. Or if you can trust me. I don't either, Nick acknowledged. That's something we'd have to rebuild day by day. Vanessa considered his words, weighing them against the alternatives. A clean break, a new start elsewhere, the comfortable numbness of justified anger. None appealed as much as the difficult path he was offering, a chance to truly know each other, perhaps for the first time. One day at a time, she said finally. No promises beyond that. Nick nodded, understanding the tentative acceptance in her words. One day at a time. Zoe stepped between them, taking each parent's hand in hers. For a moment, they stood connected, 3 people damaged but not destroyed, facing an uncertain future together. Above them, the lighthouse beam swept across the night sky, a warning of danger, a guide towards safety, a beacon of possibility in the darkness. Chapter 6, Reclamation. Dominic Reeves had been methodical, calculated, ruthless. Nicholas Harmon had been patient, disciplined, dependable. The man who sat across from Dr. Eleanor Walsh, with Vanessa beside him on the therapy couch, was someone new, an integration still in progress, rough edges visible. Let's discuss communication patterns, Dr. Walsh suggested 3 weeks into their twice-weekly sessions. Vanessa, you mentioned feeling Nick was emotionally unavailable before your indiscretion. Vanessa nodded, hands clasped tightly in her lap. He was physically present, but mentally elsewhere. Always working, always planning the next project. Nick's jaw tightened. I was securing our future. At the expense of our present, Vanessa countered. Every conversation circled back to business, investments, plans 5 years ahead. Dr. Walsh observed the familiar pattern emerging. Nick's practicality clashing with Vanessa's need for emotional connection, and redirected. Nick, what prevented you from sharing your thoughts, your worries, your plans with Vanessa more fully? Nick considered the question, his expression guarded. Habit, I suppose. Compartmentalization was survival for Dominic. Keep everything separate, need-to-know basis only. Even with your wife? Especially with Vanessa, he admitted. I wanted to protect her from anything difficult or unpleasant. Including your true self? Dr. Walsh pressed gently. Nick's silence was answer enough. Outside the therapist's office, reconstruction continued on multiple fronts. Bryant Reynolds oversaw Harmon Construction's transition back to normal operations. The Palmetto Resort development proceeded with new investors. Nick worked remotely, maintaining distance from daily operations while focusing on family. Home life settled into a cautious routine. Nick moved into the guest room, respecting the boundaries Vanessa had established. They shared meals, discussed practical matters, occasionally even laughed together, though tension remained, unresolved questions hovering between them. Zoe observed this careful dance with hopeful anxiety, alternating between mediator and withdrawn observer, depending on the day. Her relationship with Nick improved steadily. Hours spent together rebuilding trust through honest conversations. With Vanessa, progress came more slowly, the betrayal of using her against Nick a deeper wound than either had anticipated. 6 weeks after the lighthouse meeting, Nick received a call that threatened their fragile equilibrium. "Theodore Sullivan is asking for you," Bryant said without preamble. "Says it's urgent." Nick's stomach tightened. What does he want? Wouldn't say. Just that there's unfinished business regarding Valeni. Nick ended the call and sat motionless in his home office, possibilities cycling through his mind. He believed the Valeni situation concluded. Leo in federal custody, his criminal network dismantled, his connections to the Harmons severed. What unfinished business could remain? More concerning, what would reconnecting with Theodore mean for the progress they'd made? Nick had promised complete transparency with Vanessa, but reopening the Valeni chapter risked everything they'd rebuilt. That evening, after Zoe had gone to bed, Nick found Vanessa on the back patio, wrapped in a light throw against the autumn chill. "Mind some company?" he asked from the doorway. She gestured to the chair beside her. "Couldn't sleep?" Sullivan called. Nick said directly, sitting down. "Says there's unfinished business with Valeni." Vanessa tensed visibly. "What kind of business?" "I don't know. I haven't called back yet." Nick watched her carefully. "I wanted to discuss it with you first." Surprise flickered across her face, then appreciation for the consideration this represented. "What are you thinking?" "That I've worked hard to put Dominic Reeves behind me again. That contacting Theodore risks bringing that version of myself forward." Nick's expression remained neutral, though the conflict showed in his eyes. "But also that ignoring potential threats has never ended well for me." Vanessa considered this. "What does your instinct tell you?" "That Theodore wouldn't reach out unless it mattered. He respects the boundaries I've set." "Then maybe you should hear what he has to say," Vanessa suggested quietly. "Not to act, necessarily. Just to know." Nick studied her, surprised by the response. "You're not worried about me slipping back into old patterns?" "Terrified," she admitted. "But hiding from problems hasn't worked well for either of us. If there's something unresolved with Valeni that could threaten us, I'd rather know than be blindsided." The honesty between them, still new, still fragile, felt like progress. Nick reached across the space between chairs, offering his hand. After a moment's hesitation, Vanessa took it. "Whatever Theodore says," Nick promised, "we decide together what happens next." The following morning, Nick drove to a pier in St. Petersburg where Sullivan had suggested they meet. The older man waited at the end, watching pelicans dive for fish. "Wasn't sure you'd come," Sullivan said, as Nick approached. "Neither was I," Nick admitted. "What's this about, Theodore?" Sullivan gestured to a nearby bench. Once seated, he spoke quietly. "Valeni's talking, making deals with the feds. Expected. He's saving himself." "Yes, but he's offering something specific in exchange for witness protection. Something about South Tampa, 25 years ago." Nick went very still. "The Reeves case?" Sullivan nodded grimly. "Somehow, he connected you to it. Claims he has evidence linking Dominic Reeves, you, to those deaths." "The Reeves case. 3 men found executed in an abandoned warehouse. A case that had gone cold decades ago. The job that had gone wrong, prompting Dominic Reeves' death and Nicholas Harmon's birth." "That's impossible," Nick said, though doubt crept in. "No evidence existed. That's why we walked away clean." "Someone talked," Sullivan replied. "Someone who knew enough to point Valeni in the right direction." "Who?" "I'm working on it. But that's not the immediate problem." Sullivan leaned closer. "If Valeni makes this deal, the feds will reopen the case. They'll investigate Nicholas Harmon, find a connection to Dominic Reeves. Everything you've built, everyone you've protected, it all comes crashing down." Nick stared at the water, mind racing. "How much time do we have?" "Days, not weeks. Valeni's lawyers are pushing hard for immunity." "What do you suggest?" Sullivan's expression hardened. "You know what needs to happen. Valeni can't testify if he's not alive to do it. The old solution. The Dominic solution." Nick felt that part of himself stir, calculating angles, methods, alibis. "No," he said finally. "I made a promise. To Vanessa, to myself. I'm not going back there." "This isn't about going back," Sullivan argued. "It's about survival. About protecting your family from what's coming." "There's always another way," Nick insisted, standing. "I'll find it." Sullivan watched him with something like disappointment. "The Nick I knew wouldn't hesitate. The Nick you knew died in Tampa Bay, Nick replied. I'm someone else now. Someone better. Better might get you prison time, Sullivan warned. Or worse. Then I'll face that consequence, Nick said firmly. But I won't become Dominic again. Not even to save myself. Back home, Nick found Vanessa in the kitchen preparing lunch. Her expression tightened seeing his. That bad? She asked. Nick explained the situation fully. The Reeves case, the evidence Valenti claimed to have, the potential consequences. Vanessa listened without interrupting, her face paling progressively. When he finished, including Sullivan's suggestion, she asked simply, "What will you do?" "Face it," Nick answered. "If Valenti has evidence connecting me to those deaths, I'll deal with the consequences legally. No more running. No more Dominic solutions. Even if it means prison." Even then, Vanessa set down the knife she'd been using to chop vegetables, hands trembling slightly. "You'd sacrifice everything? The business? Your freedom? Us? I've spent 20 years running from who I was," Nick said quietly. "It hasn't worked. The only way forward is through facing whatever comes honestly. And us." Vanessa pressed. "Where does that leave our family?" "That depends on you," Nick replied. "I wouldn't blame you for walking away if this explodes publicly. You and Zoe deserve better than being dragged through that kind of scrutiny." Vanessa studied him, seeing the resignation in his eyes, and beneath it, the fear not for himself, but for them. In that moment, something shifted in her perception. The man before her wasn't Nicholas Harmon, respectable businessman hiding dark secrets. Nor was he Dominic Reeves, dangerous operative calculating advantages. He was simply a man trying to do better than his past, willing to sacrifice himself rather than compromise again. "I've been thinking a lot about forgiveness," she said finally. "About second chances. About who deserves them." Nick waited, expression carefully neutral. "You gave me a second chance after Leo," Vanessa continued. "Even knowing what I'd done, how I'd betrayed you, you offered a way forward." "That was different," Nick protested. "You made a mistake." "What I did was 25 years ago," Vanessa finished. "Whatever happened in that warehouse, whoever Dominic Reeves was, that's not the man standing in my kitchen now." Nick looked startled by this assessment. "If this comes back to haunt you legally," Vanessa said, "we'll face it together. All three of us. As a family." The simple declaration, "we'll face it together," affected Nick more visibly than anything in recent memory. His carefully maintained composure cracked, raw emotion showing through. "I don't deserve that," he said hoarsely. "Probably not," Vanessa agreed with unexpected lightness. "But then, I didn't deserve your forgiveness either. Yet here we are." That evening, they called a family meeting. Zoe joined them in the living room, immediately sensing the gravity of the situation. "What's wrong?" she asked, looking between them. Together, Nick and Vanessa explained the situation in age-appropriate terms, that Nick's past might resurface through Leo's testimony, that legal challenges could follow, that difficult times potentially lay ahead. Zoe listened intently, expression serious beyond her years. When they finished, she asked the question they'd been dreading. "Does this mean you might go to prison, Dad?" Nick nodded. "It's possible, though we'll fight it with everything we have." Zoe was silent for a long moment, processing. "Is it true? What they'll say you did?" Nick and Vanessa exchanged glances. This was the moment of truth, literally. "Yes," Nick admitted finally. "Not exactly as they'll present it, but yes. I was involved in something terrible when I was young. People died who shouldn't have." Instead of the horror or rejection they'd feared, Zoe's expression reflected something closer to acceptance. "But you changed, became Dad instead." "I tried," Nick said softly. "Every day since." Zoe nodded, understanding the essential truth. Her father had worked his entire adult life to transcend his origins, to become someone worthy of love and respect. "Then we'll help you fight," she declared with teenage certainty. "All of us together." The simple solidarity, mother and daughter united in support despite knowing the worst, moved Nick deeply. For the first time since Sullivan's call, he felt something beyond resignation. Hope, perhaps, or determination. That night, unable to sleep, Nick found himself drawn to the kitchen. To his surprise, Vanessa was already there, nursing a cup of tea. Seems we both have insomnia, he observed, pouring himself water. She smiled faintly. Lot to process. Nick sat across from her. I've been thinking about alternatives, legal strategies, and the evidence Valeni claims to have. It must be circumstantial at best. After 25 years, nothing solid could remain. Vanessa considered this. Could we get ahead of it somehow, before he makes his deal? Possibly. Nick's expression turned thoughtful. Bryant has connections in the U.S. Attorney's Office. If we approach them first with a limited version of the truth. A confession? Vanessa looked alarmed. Not exactly. More like information that helps solve a cold case without directly implicating me. Enough to make Valeni's testimony seem less valuable. Is that possible? It's complicated, Nick admitted. But it's better than waiting for the hammer to fall. They discussed possibilities late into the night. The shared problem-solving creating an intimacy that had been missing for months. Whatever came next, they would face it as partners, damaged but healing, uncertain but united. The following morning, Nick contacted Bryant, outlining a risky but potentially effective strategy. Bryant would approach federal prosecutors with anonymous information about the Reeves case, details only someone involved would know, but crafted a point toward others who had died in the intervening years. The goal: decrease Valeni's bargaining power by rendering his information less unique and valuable. For 3 tense days, they waited as Bryant worked his connections. Regular updates provided little comfort. Prosecutors interested but cautious. Valeni's deal proceeding, time running short. On the 4th day, Bryant called with news that changed everything. The U.S. Attorney's Office is dropping their deal with Valeni, he reported, disbelief evident in his voice. They're proceeding with full charges against him instead. Nick exchanged stunned glances with Vanessa, who sat beside him in the home office. Why? What happened? Someone sent them evidence that Valeni was directly involved in 3 homicides in Italy 5 years ago. Apparently, he wasn't just connected to the Camorra. He was an active enforcer before coming to the States. Nick struggled to find words. Unexpected. There's more, Bryant continued. The evidence came from Theodore Sullivan. He claimed he found it while investigating Valeni on your behalf during your conflict. After ending the call, Nick sat in stunned silence. Vanessa watched him, understanding dawning. Theodore protected you, she said quietly. Without being asked, Nick nodded slowly. At considerable risk to himself. Why would he do that? After you rejected his solution? Nick considered the question. Because despite everything, he still sees me as family. And Theodore protects family, regardless of the cost. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. The man Nick had tried so hard to leave behind had ultimately saved him from the consequences of his past. The mentor he'd rejected had intervened anyway, offering protection without demanding a return to old ways. That evening, Nick drove alone to the same pier where he'd met Sullivan days earlier. The older man waited in the same spot, watching the sunset. Bryant told me what you did, Nick said without preamble. Sullivan shrugged. Do what needed doing. The evidence against Valeni is genuine, Sullivan interrupted. Found it through old contacts in Naples. Had been saving it as leverage, but this seemed a better use. Nick studied his former mentor. You could have let me face the consequences. Would have served me right for walking away again. Sullivan's weathered face softened slightly. You didn't walk away from the life, Nick. You walked toward something better. There's a difference. Still, you took a significant risk. If they trace the evidence back to you, then I'll handle it, Sullivan said firmly. I'm too old to start worrying about consequences now. They stood in companionable silence, watching the sky transform from gold to purple. Finally, Nick asked the question that had been troubling him. Theodore, the Reeves case, were we wrong? About what happened that night? Sullivan considered the question carefully. We were young, arrogant, thought we understood the game better than we did. People died who shouldn't have, yes. But the men we were after weren't innocents either. That doesn't justify it. No, Sullivan agreed. But it means you don't have to carry it alone. That night shaped all of us who were there. Some ran from it. Some embraced it. You did something harder. You learned from it, became better because of it. The absolution, from the one person who knew the full truth, lifted a weight Nick had carried for decades. Not erasing responsibility, but contextualizing it within a life that had strived for redemption ever since. "Thank you," Nick said simply. "For everything." Sullivan nodded, understanding the depth behind the words. "Go home to your family, Nick. Live the life you've earned." On the drive home, Nick's phone rang. "Vanessa. Is everything okay?" he asked immediately. "Better than okay," she replied, voice thick with emotion. "Zoe just showed me something I think you should see. How soon can you get home?" Intrigued, Nick returned to find them waiting in the living room. Zoe held her laptop open, expression a mix of pride and nervousness. "What's this about?" he asked. "Show him," Vanessa encouraged. Zoe turned the screen toward Nick. On it was a college application essay titled "Second Chances: What My Father Taught Me About Redemption." "I wasn't going to show anyone," Zoe explained hesitantly. "But with everything happening, I thought maybe you should read it." Nick sat beside her, beginning to read. The essay detailed, with remarkable insight, how watching her parents navigate betrayal, forgiveness, and honesty had reshaped her understanding of human complexity. How her father's willingness to face consequences rather than compromise his new principles had demonstrated true strength. How her mother's capacity for forgiveness had shown courage of a different kind. By the final paragraph, Nick's vision had blurred with emotion. The last lines particularly struck him. "My father taught me that our past shapes us, but doesn't define us. That redemption isn't something granted, but earned daily through better choices. My mother showed me that forgiveness isn't weakness, but perhaps the greatest strength of all. Together, they've given me the most valuable education possible. How to be flawed, human, and still worthy of love." When he looked up, both Vanessa and Zoe were watching him anxiously. "Is it okay?" Zoe asked. "I wrote about this." Nick set the laptop aside and pulled his daughter into a tight embrace. "It's perfect," he said hoarsely. "Absolutely perfect." Over Zoe's shoulder, his eyes met Vanessa's. The connection between them felt different now, deeper, more honest, tempered by fire rather than broken by it. Later, with Zoe happily editing her essay upstairs, Nick and Vanessa sat together on the back patio, a single blanket wrapped around both of them against the evening chill. "I never thought we'd get here," Vanessa admitted. "After everything." "Where is here exactly?" Nick asked, genuinely curious. Vanessa considered the question. "Somewhere new. Not where we were before. That's gone. But somewhere with more truth in it. More acceptance." Nick nodded, understanding. They weren't the same people who had married 20 years earlier. Both had been irreversibly changed by recent events. Yet somehow, these new versions of themselves were finding common ground, building something potentially stronger than what had existed before. "The lighthouse," Nick said suddenly, remembering their meeting weeks ago. "You said one day at a time then. Where are we now?" Vanessa turned to face him fully. "I think we're at I still choose you. Despite everything. Because of everything. I choose this version of us. Messy, complicated, honest." In response, Nick leaned forward and kissed her, not with passion but with something deeper. Gratitude. Recognition. Choice. When they separated, Vanessa smiled. "Theodore was wrong, you know." "About what?" He said under pressure. "We revert to who we truly are." Her hand found his fingers intertwining. "But you didn't revert to Dominic. You found a way to integrate him with Nick, to be whole instead of divided." The insight startled him with its accuracy. For the first time in decades, he felt complete. Not perfect, not redeemed entirely, but authentic in a way that had previously seemed impossible. Above them, stars emerged in the darkening sky, countless points of light against infinite darkness. Nick gazed upward, contemplating the journey that had brought them here, the betrayals, the revelations, the choices, and found himself unexpectedly at peace. Not because the past had been erased or the future secured, but because in this moment, with his family safe and his truth finally known, Nicholas Harmon was exactly where he needed to be. Chapter 7. Reconstruction. 3 months after Theodore Sullivan neutralized the Valenti threat, life settled into a new normal for the Harmon family. The Palmetto Resort development neared completion, its success already assured through pre-opening bookings. Harmon Construction thrived under Nick's refocused leadership, with Bryant handling daily operations while Nick maintained strategic oversight. Home life evolved as well. Nick had moved back into the master bedroom 6 weeks earlier, their marriage slowly rekindling through newfound honesty and shared purpose. Counseling continued weekly, providing structure for difficult conversations about trust, expectations, and forgiveness. Zoe flourished amid the healing family dynamic, her college essay earning admissions to 3 top universities. She'd chosen Northwestern, pleased by its distance from Florida, not to escape, she explained, but to develop independently while knowing home remained solid. December arrived with unseasonable warmth, Tampa's winter more theoretical than actual. The Palmetto Resort's grand opening was scheduled for the following week, culminating years of work and representing Nick's crowning professional achievement. On Sunday evening, the family gathered in the kitchen, preparing dinner together, a new tradition established during their reconciliation. Nick chopped vegetables while Vanessa marinated chicken and Zoe assembled a salad, comfortable conversation flowing between them. The marketing team sent the final promotional video. Nick mentioned sliding chopped peppers into a bowl. They've used that footage of the sunset over the ocean. It's stunning. I still can't believe we're almost there, Vanessa replied, her tone reflecting genuine pride in his accomplishment, a marked change from her previous dismissiveness toward his work. After everything that happened, to see it actually completed. Speaking of completion, Zoe interjected, Mom showed me the anniversary plans. Very smooth, Dad. Nick shot Vanessa a questioning look. That was supposed to be a surprise. Vanessa grimaced apologetically. I needed a second opinion on packing. Tropical island. Lots of activities. It's complicated. The anniversary plans referenced their rescheduled trip to Turquoise Bay Resort in the Cayman Islands, the same destination from the voucher that had catalyzed their family crisis. Nick had rebooked it deliberately, a symbolic reclaiming of what had been corrupted. This time, the reservation remained firmly in their names, scheduled for their actual anniversary in January. Well, since the surprise is ruined, Nick said good-naturedly. Any requests for activities? Diving? Sailing? Just us, Vanessa said, catching his eye meaningfully. Everything else is details. The simple statement, and the reconnection it implied, warmed him. Before he could respond, his phone rang. Bryant. Sorry to interrupt Sunday night, Bryant said when Nick answered, but there's something you should know immediately. Frank Donato is back in town. Nick tensed, drawing concerned glances from Vanessa and Zoe. Are you sure? Positive. My contact at Miami PD confirmed he arrived yesterday. Apparently, he's been making inquiries about you. Understood. Keep me posted on any movements. Nick ended the call, expression troubled. Who's Frank Donato? Vanessa asked immediately. Nick hesitated, old instincts urging concealment. But he'd promised transparency, regardless of difficulty. Leo Valenti's cousin, he explained. Not the one arrested at the airport, another branch of the family. Frank disappeared when Leo was taken into custody, presumably fled back to Italy. And now he's back, Vanessa concluded. Looking for you. So it seems. Zoe set down her knife, alarm evident. Is he dangerous? Potentially, Nick admitted. He's old-school family. Believes in blood debts. Meaning he blames you for Leo's downfall, Vanessa said. Nick nodded. I've got security measures in place. Bryant will alert his police contacts. It's probably just posturing, but the tightness around his eyes betrayed deeper concern. Donato's return represented unfinished business, the final thread of the Valenti situation still dangling. That night, after Zoe went to bed, Nick found Vanessa in his home office, studying the family security system on the computer. Checking for weaknesses? He asked from the doorway. Making sure I understand how it works, she corrected. In case I need to use it. Nick entered, sitting on the edge of the desk. I've upgraded everything since Miami. The house is secure. It's not the house I'm worried about, Vanessa replied, looking up at him. The Palmetto opening is in 8 days. Very public, very predictable. If this Donato wanted to make a statement, The scenario had already occurred to Nick. I've doubled security for the event. Added undercover personnel. Everyone attending will be screened. And if that's not enough, Vanessa pressed. Nick, maybe we should postpone. Give this time to resolve. We can't postpone. The investors, the press, the bookings, everything's in motion. Nick sighed, running a hand through his hair. Besides, I won't live in fear again. We've come too far for that. Vanessa studied him, recognizing the resolve that had first attracted her to him decades earlier. Then we face it together, whatever comes. The following day, Nick met with Bryant at the Palmetto Resort, where workers applied finishing touches to the lobby's marble floors and soaring ceiling. The property sprawled impressively along the beachfront, its design blending luxury with environmental sensitivity. Security updates? Nick asked as they toured the restaurant, where staff practiced service routines. Donato checked into the Harbor View Hotel yesterday, Bryant reported. He's made no attempt to hide his presence. Actually seems to want you to know he's here. Classic intimidation play, Nick observed. Any associates with him? 2 men, likely muscle. They haven't left the hotel much. Mostly room service, occasional meetings in the restaurant. Nick nodded thoughtfully. Have you spoken with Sullivan? He's aware. Offered assistance, which I declined on your behalf. Bryant glanced at Nick. Correctly, I hope. Correctly, Nick confirmed. This ends without Sullivan's methods. One way or another. They completed the tour in the presidential suite, where the grand opening reception would be held. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic ocean views, the space elegantly appointed with custom furnishings. Beautiful, isn't it? Nick said, gazing out at the water. Everything I envisioned. Bryant joined him at the window. You've built something remarkable here, Nick. Don't let Donato tarnish it. I won't, Nick promised. But I won't hide from him, either. The decision crystallized as he spoke. He'd spent months reclaiming his life, rebuilding relationships, integrating the disparate parts of himself. He wouldn't revert to fear or compartmentalization now, not even for legitimate threats. That evening, Nick made a call he'd been contemplating since learning of Donato's arrival. Harbor View Hotel, the receptionist answered. Room 412, please, Nick requested, having obtained the information from Bryant. 3 rings, then a gruff voice answered. Pronto, Mr. Donato, Nick said calmly. Nicholas Harmon. A pause, then low laughter. Senior Harmon. Would you prefer Reeves? The use of his original name, a deliberate provocation, didn't surprise Nick. Harmon is fine. You are either very brave or very foolish to call me directly, Donato said, his accent thicker than Leo's had been. Do you know why I am in Tampa? I have a reasonable guess, Nick replied, but I prefer to hear it from you. My cousin Leonardo rots in federal prison because of you. His business destroyed, his reputation ruined. The family demands balance. Your cousin tried to destroy me first, Nick pointed out. Targeted my business, my family. I responded. Donato made a dismissive sound. Business disagreements happen. What you did was personal, vindictive. As personal as Leonardo seducing my wife. As vindictive as turning my daughter against me. Nick kept his voice steady despite the anger these memories still evoked. Family matters should remain private, Donato insisted. You involve the authorities. Exposed operations beyond Leo's. Created wider damage. The circular logic was typical of old-school organized crime. Attacking others permissible, retaliation unacceptable, especially if it breached the code of silence. What exactly do you want, Mr. Donato? Justice, came the simple answer. An accounting, meaning, we will discuss terms in person. Tomorrow. Noon. The pier at Ballast Point Park. Come alone. Before Nick could respond, Donato hung up. Vanessa found Nick in his office afterward, staring thoughtfully at his phone. Something's happened, she said, reading his expression. He explained the conversation, watching her face pale progressively. You're not seriously considering meeting him, she said when he finished. I'm considering all options. This isn't an option, Vanessa protested. It's walking into a trap. For God's sake, Nick, call the police. And tell them what? That a man with no criminal record in the U.S. wants to meet me at a public park. Nick shook his head. Without evidence of specific threats, they can't do anything. Then don't go. Let Brian handle it, or security, or running solves nothing. Nick interrupted gently. It just postpones the inevitable. Donato will keep coming until this is resolved. Vanessa stared at him, frustration and fear warring in her expression. This is suicide. No, Nick contradicted. It's ending something that needs ending. Cleanly, directly, without shadows or proxies. And if he kills you? Vanessa's voice cracked slightly. What then? What happens to Zoe? To me? The naked emotion in her question, the genuine fear of losing him, caught Nick off guard. Despite their reconciliation, part of him had still wondered if Vanessa truly wanted him back, or merely preferred their restructured arrangement to the alternative. This fear, raw, unfiltered, answered that question definitively. I have no intention of dying tomorrow, Nick assured her, crossing to take her hands in his. But I do intend to end this threat to our family, one way or another. Then take protection, Vanessa insisted. Bryant's security, someone, visible protection will just escalate the situation, Nick explained. Make Donato feel cornered or disrespected. That increases danger rather than reducing it. Vanessa recognized the logic, but remained unconvinced. There has to be another way. There is, Nick agreed, and I'll find it before noon tomorrow. He spent the night researching Frank Donato, calling in favors from former associates, building a comprehensive profile of the man he would face. By morning, a strategy had formed, risky but potentially effective. Zoe sensed the tension at breakfast, looking between her parents with concern. What's going on? Nick and Vanessa exchanged glances, silently debating how much to share. They'd promised honesty with their daughter, but not at the cost of her security or peace of mind. Business challenge, Nick explained carefully. Nothing to worry about. Zoe's expression made clear she didn't believe him. Dad, we agreed, no more secrets. The reminder, using his own words against him, nearly made Nick smile despite the circumstances. You're right. There's a situation with someone connected to Leo Valenti. I'm handling it today. Is it dangerous? Zoe asked directly. It could be, Nick admitted, but I'm taking precautions. Zoe absorbed this, fear evident but controlled. Promise you'll be careful? I promise. Nick squeezed her shoulder reassuringly. Now go finish getting ready for school. Everything will be fine. After Zoe left for school, driven by one of Nick's security team, he prepared for the meeting. No weapons. Donato would expect that and likely have him searched. Instead, he focused on information, leverage, psychology. Vanessa watched silently as he reviewed notes, committed key details to memory, made final calls. I should go with you, she said finally. Absolutely not, Nick replied firmly. That would change the dynamic completely. Exactly, Vanessa insisted. He's expecting intimidation tactics, threats, not a confrontation with the wife his cousin tried to steal. The suggestion surprised Nick. It's too risky. You're going regardless of risk, Vanessa pointed out. At least with me there, the conversation changes. Becomes about people, not business or vendetta. Nick considered the proposal. Vanessa's presence would indeed alter the expected dynamic significantly. Donato, operating from old-world values despite his criminal activities, might respond differently to a husband and wife united than to a business rival alone. If, and it's a big if, you came, Nick said slowly, you would stay slightly back. Let me lead. Leave immediately if I signal. Agreed, Vanessa said quickly, before he could reconsider. They arrived at Ballast Point Park 20 minutes before noon, parking some distance from the meeting point to survey the area. The pier stretched into Tampa Bay, a few fishermen scattered along its length. At the farthest point stood a solitary figure, Donato, arrived early, also assessing the terrain. Stay 3 steps behind me, Nick instructed as they approached. If anything feels wrong, turn and walk away immediately. No hesitation. Vanessa nodded, determination overriding visible nervousness. Frank Donato turned as they neared, a compact man in his 60s, expensively dressed, with steel-gray hair and calculating eyes. His gaze shifted from Nick to Vanessa, surprise registering briefly before his expression smoothed. Senior Harmon, he greeted, accent pronounced. I said come alone. My wife insisted on joining us, Nick replied calmly. Given that your cousin's actions affected her directly, it seemed appropriate. Donato's eyes narrowed. Then he offered a slight nod to Vanessa. Signora, this is unusual. So, is having my family threatened? Vanessa responded, her voice steadier than Nick had expected, especially after what Leonardo did. Donato assessed her with newfound interest. You speak boldly for someone in your position. You mean the position of standing by my husband against people who try to destroy our family? Vanessa held his gaze. Yes, I do. A tense silence followed, broken only by water lapping against the pier and distant voices of fishermen. Finally, Donato spoke to Nick. You understand why I am here. Family obligations. I understand completely, Nick confirmed. Family is precisely why I responded to Leonardo as I did. He targeted mine. And now I must respond to your response, Donato said, as if explaining something obvious. It is how balance is maintained. There's another way to see balance, Nick suggested. Leonardo's actions and my response already balanced. Further escalation serves no one. Donato smiled thinly. Easy for you to say, with my cousin imprisoned. A consequence of his own criminal activities, Nick pointed out, not fabricated charges. Regardless, the family expects action. Nick nodded, having anticipated this position. Then perhaps we should discuss the family more broadly. Not just Leonardo, but the entire Valenti operation. Donato's expression sharpened. What do you know of operations? Everything Theodore Sullivan discovered while investigating Leonardo, Nick replied. Names, dates, accounts, properties. Information that could significantly impact family interests beyond your cousin. You threaten me with exposure? Donato's voice lowered dangerously. That would be unwise. Not a threat, Nick corrected. A reality check. The information exists, secured in multiple locations. If anything happens to me or my family, it releases automatically to federal authorities worldwide. Vanessa watched this exchange silently, understanding Nick's strategy, leveraging information as protection rather than threatening direct action. You cannot blackmail your way out of blood debt, Donato insisted, though with less conviction. I'm not trying to, Nick said, tone softening. I'm offering perspective. Leonardo's imprisonment serves as his punishment. The family's wider interests remain secure, for now. Escalation changes that security harms the many to avenge one. Donato considered this, clearly weighing family obligation against broader implications. The old ways demand response. The old ways also value pragmatism, Nick countered. Wisdom in knowing which battles serve the family and which harm it. A long silence followed as Donato visibly calculated options, risks, benefits. Finally, he spoke with grudging respect. You have considered this carefully. I've had months to prepare, Nick acknowledged. Since the moment Leonardo targeted my family. And you bring your wife to this meeting, bold. Unconventional. Donato glanced at Vanessa. Leonardo spoke of you differently. Leonardo saw what he wanted to see. Vanessa replied evenly. A potential victim, not a partner. This assessment seemed to resonate with Donato, who nodded slowly. Perhaps my cousin miscalculated in more ways than one. He did, Nick confirmed, starting with underestimating what I would do to protect my family. The implicit warning that Nick would respond again if necessary hung between them, acknowledged without being stated directly. Donato straightened his jacket, decision apparently made. I will convey to the family that the matter with Leonardo has concluded. That further action would create unacceptable complications. Relief washed through Nick, though he maintained his composed expression. A wise assessment. But understand this, Donato added, steel entering his voice. This conclusion assumes no further damage to family interests. No additional exposure of operations. The information Sullivan gathered remains secure unless we're threatened, Nick assured him. I have no interest in crusades, only in protecting what's mine. Donato extended his hand, a businessman now rather than an avenger. Then we have understanding. Nick shook it firmly, sealing the verbal agreement. We do. As Donato turned to leave, he paused, looking back at Vanessa. Signora, if I may offer observation, you chose correctly in returning to your husband. Leonardo was never worthy of such loyalty. Without waiting for response, he walked away, disappearing down the pier toward the park entrance. Nick and Vanessa remained motionless until he was completely out of sight. Then, like a dam breaking, Vanessa exhaled shakily and gripped Nick's arm. "Did that work?" she asked in disbelief. "Is it over?" "I think so," Nick replied, still watching where Donato had disappeared. He's pragmatic, unlike Leo. Recognizes when potential costs outweigh benefits. "The information you mentioned, do you actually have it?" Nick smiled slightly. "Sullivan does. Comprehensive, devastating if released. Donato knows that's not an empty threat." Vanessa studied him with newfound appreciation. "You did this without violence. Without becoming Dominic again." "That was the goal," Nick acknowledged. Finding the third option, neither running nor destroying. As they walked back toward their car, Vanessa slipped her hand into his. "I'm proud of you," she said simply. The words, so basic yet so meaningful coming from her, affected Nick deeply. For decades, he'd built his life around being someone Vanessa could be proud of, someone worthy of her love. The genuine pride in her voice now, knowing everything about him, meant more than any professional achievement. At the Palmetto Resort's grand opening the following week, security remained vigilant but encountered no threats. Frank Donato had left Tampa the day after their meeting, returning to Italy according to Bryant sources. The Valenti chapter appeared truly closed. The opening itself proved spectacular. Investors delighted, press coverage glowing, bookings surging. After the formal ceremonies, Nick found a quiet moment alone on the presidential suite's balcony, gazing at the ocean stretching toward the horizon. Vanessa joined him, champagne flutes in hand. "To success," she toasted, handing him a glass. "To second chances," Nick countered, clinking his glass against hers. Professional and personal. They sipped in comfortable silence, the distant sound of the reception continuing inside. "I keep thinking about something Theodore told me months ago," Nick said eventually. "That under pressure, we all revert to who we truly are." "You proved him wrong," Vanessa observed. "You faced pressure with Donato and chose a different path." Nick considered this. Maybe, or maybe who I truly am has changed, evolved into someone who can face threats without becoming the worst version of himself, Vanessa finished. Someone who can integrate the strength of Dominic with the integrity of Nick. Nick nodded slowly. "I'm still figuring out what that integration looks like. Day by day. That's all any of us can do," Vanessa replied, leaning against him as they watched waves catch moonlight. "Figure out day by day together." The simplicity of this truth, that life required ongoing navigation rather than permanent solutions, felt liberating. For too long, Nick had sought absolute transformation, complete separation from his past. Perhaps real growth meant acceptance instead of complexity, of contradiction, of continuous becoming. As the celebration continued inside, Nick and Vanessa remained on the balcony, connected in silence, watching the eternal rhythm of the ocean, advancing, retreating, transforming the shore with each interaction, just as they transformed each other. Chapter 8. Uncharted Waters. The Turquoise Bay Resort lived up to its name. Waters shifting between cerulean and aquamarine depending on depth and sunlight, so clear that coral formations were visible from the private deck of their beachfront villa. 6 months after the Palmetto Resort's successful launch, Nick and Vanessa finally claimed their anniversary trip to the Cayman Islands. "Still can't believe we're actually here," Vanessa said, adjusting her sunglasses as they relaxed on the deck on their second morning. After everything that happened with the original voucher, Nick smiled, the memory no longer painful. "Full circle moment." "Not quite full circle," Vanessa corrected. "We're not the same people who would have taken this trip a year ago." This simple truth resonated deeply. The couple who would have originally visited this resort no longer existed. Him hiding his past behind perfect husband performance, her harboring resentment beneath surface compliance. Those versions have been necessarily destroyed before something more authentic could emerge. Better versions, I hope, Nick said. More honest ones, definitely. Vanessa reached for his hand across the small table between their loungers. I keep thinking about what might have happened if I'd actually gone through with the original plan, if Leo and I had used that voucher, if Zoe had kept our secret. Where does that thinking lead you? Nick asked, genuinely curious. Vanessa considered the question. To gratitude, strangely enough. Grateful you discovered the truth when you did, before things progressed further. Before I made irreversible mistakes based on lies, Leo's and my own. This admission, acknowledging her accountability without prompting, marked significant growth from the defensive posture she'd initially taken when confronted. I've been thinking about Theodore's role in all this, Nick offered after a comfortable silence. How he stepped in to protect me even after I rejected his methods. How he saw something worth saving that I didn't fully recognize. He loves you, Vanessa said simply, in his own complex way. The observation struck Nick as remarkably insightful. Theodore's harsh mentorship had indeed contained genuine care beneath the toughness, a willingness to see potential where others saw only damage. I invited him to visit next month, Nick confessed. Thought it was time you and Zoe properly met him. If you're comfortable with that. Vanessa's eyebrows raised in surprise. You're sure? Given his history, his knowledge of your past. That's precisely why, Nick explained. No more compartments, remember? Theodore is part of my story. A complicated part, but important. I need to help save our family, ultimately. Vanessa nodded thoughtfully. Then yes, I'd like to meet him properly. Not just as the shadowy figure from your past, but as someone who matters to you. The simple acceptance of all aspects of him, including those connected to Dominic Reeves, felt profoundly validating. For decades, Nick had assumed Theodore represented a part of himself that must remain hidden from Vanessa forever. The possibility of integration extended beyond his internal identity to his external relationships. That afternoon, they snorkeled along a coral reef teeming with tropical fish. Beneath the surface, suspended in crystal water, Nick experienced a rare moment of perfect presence. Watching Vanessa move gracefully among corals, sunlight filtering through water, creating dancing patterns on her skin. The beauty of the moment struck him deeply, made more precious by the knowledge of how easily it might never have happened. Back at their villa, showered and dressed for dinner, Nick received a video call from Zoe, who was staying with Vanessa's sister in Orlando. How's paradise? She asked immediately, her smile genuine. Pretty close to perfect, Nick admitted. How's your aunt holding up with you around? Please, I'm the one suffering through her health food obsession. Zoe groaned dramatically. Did you know there are 17 different ways to prepare quinoa? None of them good. Nick laughed, grateful for his daughter's resilient spirit. Despite everything she'd witnessed and experienced during the family crisis, she'd emerged with remarkable equilibrium. More mature, but not hardened. Wiser, but still playful. Vanessa joined the call, and they chatted about upcoming college preparations, the resort amenities, Zoe's new boyfriend. Information she shared deliberately to watch Nick's protective instincts flare. After ending the call, they walked to the resort's signature restaurant, built partially over water with glass floor sections revealing marine life below. As they settled at their table, Vanessa studied him with unexpected intensity. What? Nick asked, self-conscious under her scrutiny. I'm just... She paused, searching for words. I'm trying to see you completely. Not just the Nick I married, not just glimpses of Dominic. The whole person. The vulnerability in this admission, her deliberate effort to truly know him after 20 years, moved him deeply. And, he prompted gently, and I'm realizing how much energy we both spent maintaining illusions, she said. Me pretending I had no darkness, you pretending you had no past. Both of us performing versions of ourselves we thought the other wanted. Nick nodded, recognizing the truth in her assessment. Exhausting when you think about it. Completely, Vanessa agreed. And ultimately futile. The real parts emerged anyway, especially under pressure. Theodore was right about that much, Nick acknowledged. Crisis does reveal what's beneath the surface, for better or worse. Or both, Vanessa suggested. Your protective instincts emerged, the intensity, the strategic thinking, the absolute commitment to family. Those aren't bad qualities, Nick. They just came with harder edges than I was prepared for. This reframing, seeing his dominant traits as potentially positive rather than inherently shameful, offered a perspective Nick hadn't fully considered. Perhaps integration wasn't about suppressing his past self, but about channeling those qualities more constructively. "And what emerged in you?" he asked, genuinely curious about her self-assessment. Vanessa considered the question seriously. Rebellion. Selfishness I didn't know I harbored. A capacity for deception that frightened me once I recognized it. She met his eyes directly, but also resilience, courage to face uncomfortable truths, capacity for forgiveness of you and myself. Their dinner arrived, momentarily pausing the conversation. When it resumed, they discussed the future, Zoe's college years ahead, the Palmetto Resort's expansion possibilities, potential travel adventures together. "I've been thinking about stepping back from day-to-day operations," Nick mentioned as they shared dessert. "Bryant's proven he can handle things. Might be time for me to explore other interests." "Like what?" Vanessa asked, intrigued. "Not entirely sure yet," Nick admitted. "Something that uses different skills. Maybe consulting on security systems for high-risk businesses, or mentoring young entrepreneurs from difficult backgrounds. Something that acknowledges both sides of my experience." The possibilities reflected his evolving integration, neither hiding from his dominant skills nor defining himself solely by them. "Whatever you choose," Vanessa said, "I want to be more connected to it than I was with Harmon Construction. That was my mistake, creating separate lives instead of shared ones." The acknowledgement felt like another brick in the foundation they were rebuilding, stronger because it acknowledged previous structural weaknesses. Later that night, lying together in the villa's king-sized bed, windows open to ocean breezes and distant waves, Nick found himself unusually contemplative. "Something on your mind?" Vanessa asked, sensing his wakefulness. "Just thinking about how close we came to losing this," he said quietly. "All of it." Vanessa shifted closer, her head resting on his shoulder. "But we didn't. That's what matters." "Because of crisis," Nick observed. "Would we ever have found this honesty without it?" "Probably not," Vanessa admitted after considering the question. "We were too comfortable in our separate bubbles, too afraid of disrupting the surface peace." "Makes you wonder how many marriages continue that way indefinitely," Nick mused. "Never imploding, but never truly connecting either." "Ours won't be one of them," Vanessa said with certainty. "Whatever happens next, we've seen too much of each other's truth to go back to comfortable illusions." The promise in these words, of continued authenticity regardless of difficulty, comforted Nick deeply. They'd survived the worst by finally becoming real with each other. That foundation, however painfully established, offered security no performance could provide. As Vanessa drifted towards sleep beside him, Nick gazed out at moonlight silvering the ocean. The beauty of their surroundings, the reconnection they'd established, the future possibilities, all felt like gifts he'd nearly lost permanently. The gratitude this awareness evoked wasn't simply for the material comforts or even their repaired marriage, but for the liberation of living without compartments, without constant vigilance against exposure. For the first time in decades, he existed as one integrated person rather than carefully separated versions of himself. The peace this brought, unexpected and profound, followed him into dreams more restful than any he'd known since youth. On their final day at Turquoise Bay, they participated in a sunset sailing excursion, just the two of them and a captain who maintained discreet distance. As the catamaran glided through golden waters, Vanessa surprised Nick by producing a small wrapped package from her bag. "What's this?" he asked, accepting it curiously. "Anniversary gift," she explained. "Traditional 20th anniversary is China, but that seemed wrong for us. This felt more appropriate." Nick unwrapped the package carefully, revealing a custom compass in a polished wooden case. The face contained standard directional markings, but also custom engravings, small symbols representing significant moments in their lives together. Most moving was the inscription inside the lid. For navigating uncharted waters together, past, present, and future. All of you, all of me, always. The thoughtfulness of the gift, acknowledging their journey and commitment to authentic navigation moving forward, left Nick momentarily speechless. "It's perfect," he said finally, voice rough with emotion. "I realized something during all this," Vanessa explained. "We don't need maps with predetermined routes. We need tools to navigate whatever comes together." As the sun melted into the horizon, painting sky and sea in impossible colors, they stood together at the catamaran's bow. Not the perfect couple they'd once pretended to be, but something more valuable. Two people who had seen the worst in each other and chosen to remain, to rebuild, to continue the journey with clear eyes and open hearts. The uncharted waters ahead held no guarantees, but they faced them equipped with truth about themselves, each other, and a commitment that had survived its greatest test. Chapter 9. Full Circle. "Dad, over here." Zoe's voice carried across Northwestern University's crowded quad, where families gathered for freshman move-in day. Nick spotted her waving enthusiastically from beneath a maple tree, her new roommate beside her. Navigating through the crowd with Vanessa, Nick felt the familiar mixture of pride and melancholy that had characterized the past weeks of preparation. Their daughter stood on the threshold of independence, excited, confident, ready for the next chapter. The knowledge that they'd nearly fractured irreparably before reaching this milestone made the moment particularly poignant. "There's my college girl," Nick said, embracing Zoe warmly. "How's the dorm situation?" "Smaller than my closet at home," Zoe admitted, "but amazing anyway. And Whitney's already set up the best sound system on the floor." Introductions were made, campus tours conducted, final supplies purchased. Through it all, Nick observed the easy confidence with which Zoe navigated her new environment, introducing her parents to orientation leaders, discussing course selections, making plans with other freshmen. The maturity she displayed reflected not just normal development, but the accelerated growth that comes from weathering family crisis. That evening, after helping arrange Zoe's half of the dorm room and taking both girls to dinner, the inevitable moment arrived. Time for parents to depart. "Call anytime," Vanessa reminded Zoe as they stood outside the residence hall. "Day or night." "I know, Mom," Zoe said with affectionate exasperation. "We've been through this." When Nick's turn came, he found words momentarily inadequate. This capable young woman, poised between childhood and adulthood, represented everything worth fighting for in his life. The thought of leaving her, even in this positive context, tightened his throat unexpectedly. "I'm proud of you, kiddo," he managed finally. "Not just for this," he gestured toward the campus, "but for who you've become, how you've handled everything this past year." Zoe's expression softened. "I had good examples," she said quietly, including both parents in her glance, "of resilience, of starting over when necessary." The wisdom in this observation, acknowledging their struggles while appreciating the ultimate outcome, struck Nick anew. Their daughter had not only survived their family upheaval, but extracted meaningful lessons from it. The goodbye, when it came, contained the appropriate mixture of emotion and encouragement. Tears were shed, final hugs exchanged, promises of regular communication confirmed. Then Nick and Vanessa walked away, leaving their daughter to begin her independent journey. "She'll be fine," Vanessa said as they reached their hotel, voice steady despite the moisture in her eyes. "Better than fine," Nick agreed. "She's stronger than either of us were at her age." Because of everything that happened? Vanessa wondered. Nick considered this. Partly, but also because she knows the truth now, about herself, about us. No more family myths to maintain or secrets to navigate. The observation applied equally to their marriage, Nick realized. The myths they'd constructed, of his spotless past, of her perfect contentment, of their idyllic family, had ultimately proven more dangerous than the messy truths they'd replaced them with. Back in Tampa the following week, Nick fulfilled a promise made months earlier, introducing Theodore Sullivan to his family properly. The meeting took place at their home, a deliberately casual barbecue designed to normalize what might otherwise feel formal or intimidating. Theodore arrived punctually, bottle of good bourbon in hand, his weathered face betraying uncharacteristic nervousness. The famous Theodore, Vanessa greeted him at the door, extending her hand. "I've heard so much about you." "Hopefully not everything," Theodore replied with surprising humor, accepting her handshake. "Nick tends to exaggerate my worst qualities." "On the contrary," Vanessa corrected, leading him to the backyard where Nick manned the grill. "He credits you with saving his life. Twice, apparently." Theodore's expression softened as he spotted Nick, who set down his tongs to embrace his former mentor. "Welcome to our home," Nick said simply. The significance of the statement, inviting his past literally through the front door of his present life, wasn't lost on either man. Zoe, home for the weekend from Northwestern, observed the older man with frank curiosity. "So you knew my dad when he was Dominic?" Theodore nodded, accepting the directness of her question. "Helped train him, in fact, though he quickly surpassed my expectations." "In your line of work?" Zoe pressed, testing boundaries. "Zoe," Nick cautioned gently. "It's a fair question," Theodore said, surprising them all. To Zoe, he continued, "Yes, in work that sometimes crossed legal boundaries. But more importantly, I knew your father as someone determined to overcome extremely difficult circumstances, someone unwilling to be defined by where he started." The simple dignity in this description, focusing on character rather than activities, seemed to satisfy Zoe. "That sounds like Dad," she acknowledged. Throughout the afternoon, Nick observed the careful integration of worlds he'd once kept rigidly separated. Theodore shared carefully edited stories from Nick's youth, emphasizing his determination and intelligence rather than specific operations. Vanessa reciprocated with anecdotes from their early marriage and Zoe's childhood. Gradually, conversation flowed more naturally, connections forming across previously unbridgeable divides. "Never thought I'd see this day," Theodore commented quietly to Nick as they stood together watching Vanessa and Zoe clear dinner dishes inside. "You living fully in one piece instead of fragments." "Neither did I," Nick admitted. "Spent most of my adult life convinced it was impossible." "Most people never manage it," Theodore observed. "The integration. Easier to keep everything compartmentalized, even if it slowly tears you apart inside." Nick studied his mentor thoughtfully. "Is that what happened to you?" Theodore's expression registered surprise at the personal question, then shifted to rueful acknowledgement. "Probably. Too late for me to change now." "I don't believe that," Nick said firmly. "If I could rebuild after everything collapsed, anyone can." "Different circumstances," Theodore demurred. "Different choices available." "Different choices, same principle," Nick countered. "It's never too late to stop dividing yourself." Later, as they walked Theodore to his car, the older man paused before leaving. "You've built something remarkable here, Nick. Not just the business, the life, the family." He glanced back at the house. "Worth protecting at any cost." "I know," Nick agreed. "That's what I've finally understood. Protecting them means being whole myself. No more hidden corners or separate selves." Theodore nodded slowly, something like regret briefly visible in his eyes. "Wish I'd learned that lesson earlier myself." He clasped Nick's shoulder. "Don't waste this second chance." "I won't," Nick promised. As Theodore drove away, Vanessa joined Nick in the driveway. "He's not what I expected," she admitted. "In what way?" "More human," Vanessa explained. "The way you described him before. He seemed almost mythological. This larger-than-life figure who shaped you completely." Nick considered this assessment. "I probably needed to see him that way for a long time. Made it easier to separate that life from this one, if he represented something almost fictional. And now I can see him as he actually is. A complicated man who did what he thought necessary in difficult circumstances. Who helped me when he didn't have to. Who continues to look out for me, in his way." The capacity to view Theodore with this nuance, neither idealizing nor demonizing him, reflected Nick's broader integration. People, like themselves, contained multitudes, aspects admirable and troubling, choices defensible and questionable. 1 year after the lighthouse meeting where they'd cautiously agreed to rebuild, Nick and Vanessa stood together on Clearwater Beach at sunset. The same spot where they'd first met 21 years earlier, where they'd tentatively reconciled 12 months ago. Anniversary tradition? Vanessa asked as they walked barefoot along the shoreline. Thought it might be, Nick replied. Annual check-in. No performance reviews, just honest assessment. Vanessa smiled at the corporate terminology. And what's your honest assessment of year 1 of our reconstruction project? Nick considered the question seriously. Stronger foundation than the original building. Better communication systems. More realistic expectations for ongoing maintenance. Very contractor of you, Vanessa observed with amusement. Professional hazard, Nick acknowledged. Your assessment? Vanessa gazed out at the darkening water, gathering her thoughts. I think we've stopped trying to protect each other from reality. Stopped assuming we know what the other needs without asking. Learn to actually listen instead of just waiting for our turn to speak. The simple accuracy of this evaluation, focusing on process rather than outcomes, struck Nick as profoundly insightful. I've been thinking about what true redemption means, he said after they'd walked in comfortable silence for several minutes. Not just escaping consequences or creating a better-looking life, but actual transformation. And Vanessa prompted, I think it requires witnesses, Nick concluded. People who see both who you were and who you're becoming, who hold you accountable but also acknowledge growth. Like Theodore for you, Vanessa suggested. And you for me. Nick nodded. Exactly. Without witnesses, change remains theoretical. Untested. They paused, watching the lighthouse beam begin its nightly rotation. The same beacon that had illuminated their first meeting, their tentative reconciliation, and now their reflective anniversary. So, where do we go from here? Vanessa asked, echoing the question that had haunted them throughout the rebuilding process. Nick turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. Forward together. Not perfect, not pretending, just present and honest. Day by day. The simplicity of this answer, focusing on direction and approach rather than specific destination, felt right for who they'd become. No more elaborate 5-year plans or carefully constructed facades. Just commitment to the ongoing journey of growth, integration, and authentic connection. As darkness settled completely over the beach, the lighthouse beams swept across water and sand, momentarily illuminating them in its path. Two people standing together against encroaching darkness, changed but undefeated, scarred but stronger. I choose you, Vanessa said quietly, echoing words spoken months earlier. Still, again, always. And I choose you, Nick replied. All of me choosing all of you. The vow, simpler yet more profound than their original wedding promises, acknowledged the complexity of their journey and the authenticity they'd fought to achieve. Not perfect people making perfect promises, but real people committing to real connection despite inevitable imperfections. In the distance, the Palmetto Resort's lights glowed along the coastline, a visible reminder of what they'd built together professionally. But the invisible reconstruction of trust, of honesty, of integrated identity represented their true masterwork. As they turned to walk back toward their car, Nick glanced once more at the lighthouse beacon sweeping steadily through darkness. Like their journey, it offered no permanent illumination, just regular, reliable moments of